Daddy. When hotel maid Victoria Marlowe takes a last-minute shift at a high-profile gala, the last person she expects to see is James Burlington, the enigmatic CEO who vanished from her life years ago after one unforgettable night. But when her precocious daughter Chloe spots him and calls out to him in front of New York's elite, the secret Victoria's kept for 6 years is out. Now, James wants answers. The board wants silence, and Victoria wants nothing more than to protect her daughter and her heart. But between scandal, second chances, and a bond neither of them expected, James may discover that the real legacy he's meant to build is love. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love hearing from you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt romance, one life at a time. The alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., slicing through the early spring silence of the one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Victoria Marlowe stirred beneath the thin quilt, instinctively reaching to hush the sound before it could travel past the cracked door to the adjacent room. She sat up slowly, pushing her hair out of her face and rubbing her eyes. Mornings like these, cool, still, and full of responsibilities waiting in the silence, had become her rhythm. She padded quietly into the kitchenette and clicked on the kettle. Chloe's lunch was already half-packed from the night before. Peanut butter and apple slices, a juice box, and a note tucked between napkins that read, "Be kind, be brave, be you." Victoria leaned against the counter and let the warmth of the rising steam wash over her face. 6 years. It had been 6 years since her life changed in every possible way. Not that anyone at the Royal Palladium Hotel knew. To them, she was a reliable employee. Discreet, punctual, always willing to take the last-minute shift no one wanted. She kept to herself, focused on Chloe, and rarely missed a day. She liked it that way. Chloe appeared in the hallway, hair tousled from sleep, a pink stuffed bunny dangling from one hand. "You're already up," Victoria said softly, offering a tired smile. The little girl yawned and nodded, her curls bouncing. "I smelled toast." "There's no toast," Victoria laughed. "That's just hope." Chloe giggled and climbed onto the counter stool as Victoria poured hot water into a chipped mug and added instant coffee. "Can we read the next chapter of our book tonight?" Chloe asked between bites of cereal. "The one with the princess." "Of course." Victoria brushed her daughter's hair gently with her fingers. "But I'll be home late tonight. Mrs. Ruiz will tuck you in. I got assigned to a big event at work." "Will there be dancing?" Eyes wide. "Maybe. It's a fancy party in the ballroom, but I'll just be cleaning up messes while rich people make them." Chloe tilted her head. "Do you wear a dress?" "Not the kind you're thinking," Victoria said with a smirk. "It's still a uniform, just a dressy one." Chloe leaned her head on her hand. "When I grow up, I want to work in a hotel too, but only if I can wear a sparkly crown." Victoria laughed again, more softly this time. "That sounds fair." By 7 a.m., Chloe was at Mrs. Ruiz's apartment down the hall, playing with a basket of plastic fruit while the older woman filled in the crossword puzzle in pen. "She's no trouble as usual," Mrs. Ruiz said as Victoria adjusted her coat. "You just take your time tonight. Chloe's excited to stay up late with me and judge celebrity gowns on TV." Victoria smiled. "She's in good hands. Thank you, really." "Don't mention it. You've got a good thing going with her. That girl's heart is gold." Victoria hesitated. "I just hope I'm doing right by her." Mrs. Ruiz lowered her glasses and looked at her squarely. "You are, and whatever it is you think you're carrying all on your own, maybe it's time to set some of it down." Victoria's smile faded just slightly. Some weight doesn't let go that easy. She gave Chloe one last kiss on the forehead and stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind her. The hotel lobby was already humming with mid-morning business travelers and the faint scent of lemon polish. Victoria clocked in at 8:01, just in time for the department briefing. Mr. Kelly, the housekeeping manager, addressed the staff with a clipboard and a tired smile. "We've got a packed schedule today. Extra rooms to prep on floors 5 and 10. He paused. "A major event tonight. Burlington Global is hosting a charity gala in the grand ballroom. Black tie, press, investors, the whole 9 yards." Victoria's breath caught at the name. It had been years since she'd heard it spoken aloud. Burlington. "I'll need 1 or 2 of you to work the ballroom floor itself," Mr. Kelly continued. "Nothing strenuous, just on-call housekeeping in case of spills or accidents. You'll be in formal uniform. Pay bump plus overtime. She looked up. You're usually the first to volunteer. Interested? She nodded slowly. Sure. You'll report there by 5. They'll give you a fresh uniform and station you near the curtain behind the left wing. Victoria scribbled the note in her small planner, heart thudding. Burlington. There was no way. James wouldn't be there personally. It was his company's event, yes, but CEOs didn't attend every fundraiser bearing their name. And even if he did, no, he wouldn't recognize her. Not after all these years. Not with everything that had changed. Still, the name lingered in her chest like a weight. That afternoon, as she vacuumed the 10th floor corridor and refreshed linen carts, her thoughts spun like the gears of a watch she couldn't slow. She thought of James's warm laugh, the way he'd whispered into her hair the night they met, promising he wasn't like the others. She thought of the letter she'd started writing after Chloe was born and never sent. And she thought of the one secret she'd carried for 6 years without a single misstep. But secrets had a way of finding their moment, and hers was coming far sooner than she knew. Victoria stepped into the employee changing room and tugged the curtain shut behind her. The air inside was heavy with starch, lavender deodorant, and the quiet murmurs of other housekeepers getting ready for the night shift. She peeled off her usual work attire and slipped into the formal black blouse and skirt reserved for event coverage. Clean lines, fitted sleeves, a delicate royal palladium crest stitched in silver over the breast pocket. The shoes pinched. The neckline was higher than what she was used to. She tugged at it absently, unsure whether she looked polished or like she was playing dress-up. "Don't forget your name tag," a voice reminded her from the mirror beside her. It was Lana, a fellow maid who always wore bright lipstick and spoke in confident, clipped sentences. Victoria gave her a small smile. "Thanks. I'd forget my head tonight," Lana chuckled. "You okay? You've been quiet all day." "I'm always quiet," Victoria deflected lightly. Lana narrowed her eyes. "Quieter than usual." Victoria didn't respond. She adjusted the elastic band holding her hair back and focused on smoothing the front of her blouse instead. In truth, her stomach had been fluttering all afternoon. She hadn't let herself think about James in years. Not really. Not outside of the moments when Chloe asked innocent, impossible questions like, "Why don't I have a dad like Ben does?" James Burlington. His name alone carried weight. His face had once graced the business magazines and the airport kiosks she passed on her way to the night shift. Visionary CEO, reluctant heir, the man who rebuilt Burlington Global. But to her, once, he had just been James, a man with warm eyes and a dimple he tried to hide when he smiled too wide. He hadn't told her who he was that night. Not really, just that he worked in finance. She hadn't pressed. Neither of them had been looking for permanence. Or so she thought. Until Chloe. And now here she was, standing in a stiff uniform with borrowed courage, about to work the very event hosted by the company he commanded. Maybe it was just another gala to him, but for her, it was walking a tightrope over a life she'd built to keep her child safe. By the time she reached the ballroom, the transformation was complete. Candlelight glowed from ornate sconces. Gold-trimmed tablecloths shimmered beneath crystal glassware. Waiters moved in practiced silence, polishing the silver for the third time. A soft hum of music played from the string quartet warming up in the corner. The room smelled of jasmine, white lilies, and expensive perfume. Victoria was stationed behind a velvet curtain along the side wall, close enough to monitor for accidents, far enough to remain unnoticed. She was good at being invisible. Years of quiet labor had made it second nature. Still, something in her chest pulled tight as the first wave of guests arrived. The rich moved differently, like the floor had been built to carry only them. Their laughter was subdued, almost rehearsed. Their suits were better tailored than her best memories. She watched, cataloged, not for envy, but for survival. The last thing she wanted was to catch anyone's eye. Across the ballroom, in the hotel's private valet entrance, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. James Burlington stepped out, adjusting the silver cufflinks on his custom tuxedo with quiet precision. His assistant, Marcus, fell into step beside him, checking something on his tablet. "They've started seating. The media's been kept outside, per your request. Eleanor will handle press rounds later if you're not up for it." James didn't respond right away. His mind had been elsewhere all day, unsettled in a way he couldn't name. This gala was routine. His calendar was built around these events. Smile, donate, network, leave. He rarely even stayed for dessert. But something had pulled at him today. A name on the staff list. A memory he hadn't thought of in years. A shadow he thought he'd left behind. He wasn't even sure why it caught his attention, just a passing glance at an internal roster when final approvals were signed. It wasn't a rare name. Still, it had stuck, and now, stepping into the ballroom with his mask of indifference polished to perfection, he let his eyes scan the room. Not for investors, not for photographers, but for something. Someone. He wasn't ready to admit he hoped he'd see. Behind the velvet curtain, Victoria felt her pulse shift. She didn't know how, but she knew. He was here. A hum passed through the room, subtle but unmistakable, like the air holding its breath for someone important. She peeked out from behind the curtain, just for a moment. And there he was, James Burlington, tall, composed, suit sharp enough to cut glass, but his face, older, yes, sharper, but still undeniably him. Her chest tightened. 6 years collapsed into seconds, the weight of everything unsaid, everything unshared, pressed in on her all at once. He didn't see her. Not yet. But she knew this moment wouldn't stay still for long. The past was already catching up, and her carefully built world was one glance away from being turned upside down. The night moved in careful rhythm. Music swelling in waves, laughter cresting, champagne bubbling in fluted glasses. Victoria had remained in the shadows, slipping from one edge of the ballroom to another, clearing a fallen napkin here, replacing a damp linen there. She'd been invisible all evening, just how she needed it. But her nerves hadn't calmed, not since she saw him. James Burlington was standing near the far end of the room, deep in conversation with a group of investors, his glass untouched in his hand. He looked the same in so many ways, composed, contained, except now he wore that armor with years of polish. Victoria took a slow breath, anchoring herself. She could make it through the night. She had to, until she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Excuse me, miss." Victoria turned toward the hallway entrance and froze. There, standing beside a slightly winded Mrs. Ruiz, was Chloe, still in her cozy zip-up sweater and floral leggings, her curly hair pulled into a high, bouncy ponytail, and in her small hands, a round tin wrapped in a pink ribbon. "Chloe?" Victoria's voice came out in a hush of disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Chloe broke into a smile, proud and excited. "Happy birthday, Mommy." Mrs. Ruiz smiled sheepishly. "Don't panic. We're not here to stay. I know it's your long shift, but this one insisted we had to bring you your birthday surprise before bedtime." Victoria blinked. "I told you I didn't want anything." "She made cookies," Mrs. Ruiz said gently. 3 of them. She wanted you to have one before your dinner break, said it would make you smile. Chloe held up the tin like a peace offering. "I made the ribbon, too." Victoria knelt down and accepted it, heart twisting. "You didn't have to come all the way here. What if security stopped you?" "Well, they almost did," Mrs. Ruiz murmured under her breath. "But Chloe told them it was a birthday emergency." Victoria tried to smile, but her hands trembled as she held the tin. She wasn't worried about rules. She was worried about what could happen next. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered, pulling Chloe into a tight hug. "But you need to go, baby. This isn't a place for little girls." Chloe leaned closer, clutching her favorite stuffed dog, the one she carried everywhere. "He wanted to come too," she whispered. "He gets scared when you're not home." Before Victoria could respond, a gust of laughter spilled from the ballroom doors. The music swelled slightly, and Chloe turned toward the sound, curious. Then it happened. James Burlington stepped into the hallway, moving toward the refreshment alcove just as Chloe looked up. Her tiny hand pointed. Her eyes widened with open, innocent recognition. "Mommy, look," she whispered. "That's him." Victoria's breath stopped. "That's who?" Chloe turned to her with absolute certainty. "That's the man in the photo, the one in my pink picture frame. I knew it." She broke into a beaming grin and took a step forward before Victoria could react. "Daddy," she called. The sound echoed like thunder down the corridor. James paused mid-step, his brow furrowed. Slowly he turned toward the sound. His eyes landed on the little girl staring up at him with a smile that looked far too familiar. Then they shifted to Victoria, frozen, tin in her hands, panic written across every inch of her face. Time slowed. Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her voice had vanished, swallowed whole by 6 years of silence. Mrs. Ruiz stepped forward quickly, her voice low but firm. Sir, I'm terribly sorry. We didn't mean to interrupt. James blinked. Excuse me? His voice was low, confused. He looked between Chloe and Victoria, searching for some kind of logic. She's just a child, Mrs. Ruiz said gently, and her mother works here. We were just dropping off something for her birthday. Chloe nodded solemnly, holding out her stuffed dog. I have to give him back, she said. He's scared without her. Victoria knelt beside her daughter, heart pounding in her chest. Sweetheart, we have to go now. But James had already stepped closer. Victoria. His voice wasn't angry. It was stunned, quiet. What's going on? And for the first time in 6 years, she met his eyes and said nothing. Because how could she explain, in the middle of a glittering hallway, in front of their daughter, what she'd kept buried for so long? For a few impossible seconds, no one moved. The corridor stood still, suspended in the breath between memory and revelation. James's gaze flicked between the girl in front of him, wide-eyed, stuffed dog in hand, and the woman he had not seen in 6 years. Victoria hadn't changed, not where it mattered. Her hair was different, tied back, more professional, her posture more guarded, but her eyes were exactly the same warm brown with gold flecks that had haunted him long after that night. And the child with those eyes. His voice came slowly, unsteady. Is she? Victoria's throat worked, but nothing came. Her hand went to Chloe's shoulder like a reflex, protective and trembling. Not here, she managed finally, barely above a whisper. Please. James took a half step forward. Victoria, I said not here. Her tone sharpened with a kind of quiet panic. Not in front of her, not like this. Chloe glanced between them, her small brow furrowing. Did I do something bad? Mrs. Ruiz stepped in quickly, soft but firm. Of course not, sweetheart. Why don't we let Mommy take her break now, She looked at Victoria, then James. Mr. Burlington, I think this conversation would be better saved for a moment with fewer tuxedos and champagne glasses. James's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, slowly. His voice, when it returned, had cooled. Of course, I didn't mean to. He stopped. There was no right thing to say. Not here. Not now. Victoria crouched to meet Chloe's eye level. You didn't do anything wrong, love, but I need you to go home with Mrs. Ruiz now, okay? I'll be home later. But what about my cookie? Victoria managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll eat it on my break, I promise. Chloe handed her the tin like a sacred object, then leaned in and kissed her cheek. I love you. I love you too, Victoria whispered, arms squeezing her close, to the moon and back. Mrs. Ruiz gently took Chloe's hand. Let's go, birthday elf. We'll watch a movie while we wait for Mommy to come home. As they walked down the hall, Chloe looked back once and gave a little wave to James, who stood frozen in place. He raised a hand automatically in return, still trying to process the aftershock of what had just unfolded. When they were gone, silence returned. James finally exhaled and turned toward Victoria. Is she mine? Her answer came slowly. Yes. One word, one syllable, 1,000 consequences. He staggered back a step, just enough to lean against the wall. His voice was quiet. I didn't know. You never... I know, she cut in. Her hands were tight at her sides. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't know because I never told you. Why? His voice cracked like a fault line, quiet but raw. Victoria's breath hitched. She looked away toward the ballroom door, where the hum of distant music still played, oblivious to the storm on the other side of the curtain. Because I didn't know who you really were until after you were gone. You never told me your last name that night. Just James. You left before I could ask. He was silent. She continued, more quietly. By the time I found out, it was in a business article. Burlington Global. You, standing in front of a stock exchange building with that same suit you wore when we met. James closed his eyes. I should have... No, she said, voice trembling now. We had one night, that's all it was. Neither of us said it would be more, and I told myself it was better that way. He looked at her, unblinking. And her? You made that choice for both of us. Victoria flinched, then took a breath, gathering herself. I did, because I had to, because I didn't know what kind of man you really were. And by the time I thought about trying, you were already a name on a magazine cover, a public figure, untouchable, and I had a baby. I was scared. James didn't speak for a long time. His face was unreadable. How old is she? 6, he exhaled. Of course. It lined up perfectly. What's her name? He asked softly. Chloe. The name landed heavy in his chest. Beautiful. Simple. Real. She looks like you, he murmured. She has your eyes, Victoria said before she could stop herself. That broke something. In both of them. James looked down at his hands. I don't know what to say. Victoria nodded slowly. There's nothing to say. Not yet. I want to talk, he said. Not here, but I need to understand. Everything. I need to finish my shift, she replied, voice tight but steady. We can talk, but on my terms. When I'm ready. He nodded, not out of agreement, but acknowledgement. I'll wait. And with that, she turned and slipped behind the velvet curtain back into the ballroom. Back to the safety of silence, at least for now. James stood alone in the hallway, the echo of the word daddy still ringing in his ears. James stood in the hallway long after Victoria disappeared behind the velvet curtain, after the music swelled again, after the air moved on as if nothing seismic had just occurred. But inside him, the world was tilting. A child. His child. He rubbed his thumb against his forefinger, a nervous habit no one ever saw, because no one ever saw him like this. Not outside the boardroom, not outside his sharply tailored persona. Chloe. The name echoed like a whisper down a long corridor of what-ifs. He should have been furious, should have felt deceived. But all he could feel was stunned and hollow. 6 years of living, building, acquiring, empty, compared to the truth that had just been handed to him by a little girl in floral leggings and a too big pink ribbon. A daughter. My daughter. He made his way back into the ballroom, slower this time, ignoring the waiting guests, the polite nods of recognition, the raised glasses. Eleanor intercepted him near the bar, her keen eyes narrowing. You disappeared for 20 minutes. Everything all right? James's voice was flat. I need to go home. Her brow lifted. Now? The board is expecting you to speak before dessert. This is your company's event. I'm aware, he said quietly. Reschedule the debrief. Carla can handle remarks. Eleanor lowered her voice. James, what happened? He looked at her, and for a second, the mask cracked. Something real. Then he turned and left the ballroom without another word. That night, James sat in his penthouse with the city glittering like a restless dream behind him. The place was sleek, modern, curated, clean lines, untouched liquor, immaculate surfaces, a fortress designed for someone who didn't want to be known. He pulled out his phone and opened his secure calendar, flipping through the years. There was nothing personal in it, just meetings, flights, acquisitions. And somewhere in between all that, she had been born. He thought of the picture Chloe mentioned, the pink frame. What kind of photo had Victoria shown her? Was it one from that night? Had she remembered him with fondness or regret? He didn't know how to be angry, but he did know this. He had missed 6 birthdays, 6 bedtime stories, 6 years of first steps and first words and scraped knees and giggles, and he wanted them back. Across the river, Victoria sat at her kitchen table long after Chloe had gone to bed, the half-eaten cookie still sitting in its tin. Mrs. Ruiz had said nothing when she dropped Chloe off, just gave her a long look and a tight hug before returning to her own apartment. Victoria had thanked her in a whisper. She hadn't trusted her voice for anything more. Now, in the quiet, she wrapped both hands around a mug of tea she didn't want and let her thoughts unravel. She'd known the moment was coming. Maybe not tonight, maybe not like that, but secrets don't stay buried forever. And Chloe was never really a secret. She was the center of her world. But James, Victoria had convinced herself for years that telling him would complicate everything. And it would have. He was powerful. He was wealthy. He lived under a microscope. What kind of life could he have offered a daughter he never expected? More importantly, what kind of damage could he have done if he hadn't wanted her? Victoria had seen what that kind of rejection did to children, and she refused to risk Chloe's heart for the sake of closure. But now, James knew, and there was no going back. Later that night, after making sure Chloe was asleep, Victoria found herself standing in the hallway, staring at the small corkboard where Chloe kept her drawings and treasures. There it was. The photo, faded slightly, stuck behind a dried flower and a school sticker. It was from that night. A snapshot someone else had taken at the gala 6 years ago. James in a tuxedo, smiling, genuinely, not the business kind, her beside him laughing at something he'd whispered, a memory turned relic, and Chloe had asked about it months ago. Victoria had simply said he was a kind man Mommy once knew, a nice memory. Nothing more. Now he wasn't just a memory. Now he was real. And the question looming in her mind wasn't whether he deserved to know his daughter. It was whether she could trust him to stay once he did. Morning came too soon. Victoria stirred before her alarm, the gray light of dawn pressing gently through the curtains. For a moment she lay still, listening to the soft rise and fall of Chloe's breathing in the room next door. Everything was quieter now. But inside, her thoughts hadn't rested. James knew. That single truth rippled through her with the force of a wave that hadn't finished breaking. She rose slowly, wrapped herself in her robe, and stepped into the kitchen. The apartment felt different today. Less like the sanctuary she'd worked hard to build, and more like the ground beneath her feet had shifted. She turned on the kettle, then opened the tin Chloe had so proudly handed her. The last of the cookies sat nestled inside, slightly crumbly, shaped like stars. Victoria picked it up, pressed it to her lips, and smiled faintly. She did it for me, just like always. By the time Chloe woke up, Victoria was dressed and packed for her half-day shift. Morning, the little girl said through a yawn, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, her pink pajama set covered in cartoon hearts. You came home late, Victoria knelt to meet her. I did, but I saved your best cookie. Chloe beamed, then threw her arms around her mom's neck. You're the best. You are. Victoria squeezed her close. Hey, what do you think about spending the afternoon with Mrs. Ruiz again? I have someone I need to talk to after work. Chloe pulled back. Someone like a friend? Victoria paused. Sort of. Someone from a long time ago. Chloe tilted her head, curls bobbing. Is it about the man from the party? Her tone was innocent, curious, but Victoria felt the weight behind it. Yes, sweetheart, she said gently. We need to talk about some things. Grown-up things, but nothing bad, I promise. Chloe thought for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but can you read to me when you come home? Of course, from the doll princess story, she added, the one where her dress sparkles when she finds her tea set. You've got a deal, Victoria said, kissing her forehead. That afternoon, Victoria took a cab to the quiet cafe James had suggested via text, a message she almost didn't open. Blue Orchid Cafe, 2 p.m., quiet booth in back, whenever you're ready. She arrived at 2:07. She wasn't quite ready, but she'd promised herself this would happen on her terms. James was already there, seated in a booth, navy dress shirt rolled up at the sleeves, jacket off to the side. A black coffee sat untouched in front of him. He looked up the moment the door chimed, and stood. Victoria's breath caught, not because of how he looked, though he was infuriatingly as handsome as ever, but because this was real now. No ballroom illusions, no shadows to hide behind. Just two people sitting down with 6 years of silence between them. Hi, she said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. Hi, he echoed. He studied her. You look tired. She huffed a laugh. Welcome to motherhood. I should have been there. Victoria raised a hand. Let's start with one thing at a time. I didn't agree to this to rehash every mistake or dig into guilt. I came because she's 6, and I won't keep pretending this didn't happen. James nodded. He looked down at his coffee, then back up. Thank you for showing up. They sat in a silence that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't hostile either. Finally, James said, I don't want to bulldoze in. I know I don't deserve to just appear and expect a place. No, Victoria agreed. You don't, but you are her father, and she deserves to know who you are when she's ready. His jaw tightened. I want to be involved. I don't even know what that looks like yet, but I'm not walking away. I'm not asking you to, but I'm also not going to let you turn this into something clean and corporate. He looked genuinely wounded. Is that what you think I am? I don't know what you are now, she said. You were kind once, thoughtful, but people change. Money changes people, power too. James let out a breath. I don't want to fix this like a deal. I want to do this right, with patience if that's what it takes. Victoria nodded slowly. Then you can start by getting to know her. Not as a headline, as Chloe. James leaned forward. I'd like that. Can I see her? Even for just a little bit? Maybe, she said, cautious. But only if it's safe, only if it's calm, and only if she wants to. I'll follow your lead. She studied him. This was a man who had spent years in control of every outcome, every variable, and now he was asking, not demanding. That, more than anything, gave her a flicker of hope. Okay, she said finally. We take it one step at a time. He nodded once. One step. They sat together in the quiet cafe, the first bricks of a bridge slowly beginning to form between them. Outside, the city moved on, but inside that booth something had shifted. The past wasn't undone. The future wasn't clear. But the distance between then and now, it was beginning to close. Victoria paced the small playground tucked behind the apartment complex, her coat zipped up against the early spring breeze. The metal slide glittered in the pale afternoon sun, and swings creaked softly as the wind nudged them back and forth. She glanced at her phone for the 5th time. James was late by 3 minutes, not enough to panic, but enough to fray her nerves. She didn't know if she was ready for this. Chloe sat on the bench near the sandbox, legs swinging as she arranged her favorite dolls in a neat circle. A tiny plastic tea set sat in the middle. She wore her favorite headband, the one with the velvet bow, and a puffy pink jacket zipped to her chin. She asked this morning if she should wear her party dress, Victoria had told Mrs. Ruiz earlier. I said no, this isn't a party. But it was something. A test. Then James appeared at the corner of the path. Dressed in jeans, a charcoal sweater, and a fitted wool coat, he looked almost ordinary. Less CEO, more man. Victoria met him halfway, her voice low. She doesn't know who you are, not really, so don't push. Just be kind. James nodded, his throat bobbing with the effort to stay composed. Understood. They approached slowly. Chloe looked up from her dolls and tilted her head, thoughtful. Hi, James said, crouching a respectful distance away. You probably don't remember me from the other night. I'm James. Chloe considered him. Are you Mommy's friend? Victoria opened her mouth, but James beat her to it, his voice calm. I'd like to be, if that's okay with you. Chloe's brows lifted. Do you like tea parties? I haven't been to one in a while, he said, but I think I could learn. She gave him a slow, suspicious nod. Only if you like lemon cookies, and you have to sit still. James smiled, genuine, amused, and just the slightest bit nervous. I'll do my best. Victoria watched from a short distance as Chloe patted the spot beside her dolls. James sat cross-legged on the edge of the sandbox, looking slightly ridiculous but entirely present. Her name is Bella, Chloe explained, holding up a doll in a glittery gown. She's the queen of the tea circle. That one's Rosie. She's the dancer. And this is Cupcake. James blinked. Cupcake? She runs the bakery, obviously. Clearly, he said, solemn. It's an impressive lineup. Chloe began pouring invisible tea into tiny cups while James accepted each one with exaggerated care. Victoria couldn't help but smile behind her hand. This man who made headlines and owned global companies was now pretending to sip invisible tea with his daughter. For the first time, something in her chest eased. Just a little. Did you always want to work in a hotel? Chloe asked out of the blue. James looked confused. Why do you ask? Because Mommy works in one. And you were at the hotel. Victoria stiffened, but James didn't flinch. I was there for a special party. But I don't work there. I used to do other things. Lots of meetings, lots of phones. But right now, I'm here for something more important. Chloe's gaze narrowed, curious. Like what? Like this, he said softly. Getting to know you. A long pause. Then Chloe handed him the doll in a blue dress. You can be Princess Bubblegum. She's very serious but nice. James accepted the role without protest. Victoria sat on the nearby bench, heart thudding. She hadn't planned for this, hadn't expected it to go this gently. There were still questions to ask, boundaries to set. But for now, Chloe was smiling, and James wasn't pushing. They played for 35 minutes until Chloe's attention drifted and her stomach growled for dinner. Victoria approached carefully. Okay, sweetheart, time to say goodbye. Chloe stood, brushing sand from her leggings. Can James come again? Victoria hesitated. James looked at her, not with pressure, but with hope. She nodded slowly. Maybe. We'll see. Chloe smiled, then reached out and tugged lightly at James's hand. Bye, Mr. Bubblegum. He grinned. Goodbye, Cupcake. As they walked away, Victoria turned to him. You didn't do too badly. He looked at her, something like gratitude behind his eyes. Thank you for letting me try. Just don't make promises you can't keep, she said. She's never had a father before, but she's not missing one. She has a good life. Don't confuse her unless you mean it. James's smile faded. I mean it. She studied him, then nodded once. Okay. As she took Chloe's hand and walked away, James stood alone in the quiet, and for the first time he felt the beginning of something real. Not a deal, not a rescue, not an obligation, a connection, and he wasn't going to let it go. The diner booth was cracked along the edge, the silver trim dulled from years of elbows and coffee mugs, the kind of place Victoria always gravitated toward, unfussy, warm, and entirely forgettable. James had offered to meet anywhere, a hotel lounge, his private office, even her apartment, but she'd chosen May's Diner, a neutral place with no memory attached to it, no history. He arrived precisely on time, as she knew he would. He wore no suit, no tie, just a wool coat and dark jeans. His hair slightly tousled, as if even he couldn't focus long enough to smooth it. He sat across from her and didn't speak. Not at first. Victoria stirred her tea slowly. "So you want to know about that night?" James folded his hands on the table. "Only if you're willing to tell me." She looked down for a long moment, then up at him. "It was supposed to be a dare. That night. My friend at the time had a way of dragging me out of my shell. We were waitstaff at the gala, rotating servers. She dared me to switch out of uniform during break and crash the ballroom just for a dance." James blinked. "You weren't a guest?" She shook her head. "I borrowed a dress, fixed my hair in the hotel's staff bathroom. I only stayed 20 minutes. Her lips quirked. "Until you found me." James was quiet, remembering. "I saw you standing by the balcony. You looked like you didn't belong, but somehow like you were the only real person in the room." Victoria exhaled. "We danced, we talked. You didn't say much about yourself. No last name, just James. I figured you were shy or maybe hiding something." He grimaced. "I was hiding everything. My name always changed the conversation." "Exactly," she nodded. "I didn't want that. That night wasn't about getting rescued or meeting someone rich. It was about feeling noticed." "You were," he said quietly. She met his gaze and, for a moment, her voice softened. "It was the first time in my adult life someone saw me and didn't ask what I could clean, carry, or cover." Then her tone sharpened again, wrapped in the armor she'd learned to wear. "And then you were gone. I woke up alone in a suite I didn't recognize. No note, just a room key on the pillow." James looked stricken. "I had a 6 a.m. flight to London. I thought leaving you in the suite was a gesture. I didn't want to wake you." "Well," she said with a bitter smile, "waking me might have changed a few things." He looked away, jaw clenched. "I'm sorry, truly. I never meant to disappear." "I know." She paused, then drew a slow breath. "When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I thought about tracking you down, but I had no name. You were a ghost. And when I saw your face on a business article months later, it was too late. You were already a world apart. I didn't belong in it." James shook his head. "You had every right to tell me. And what would I have gotten? A scandal? A lawyer on my doorstep? I didn't want a court order. I wanted peace, stability. Chloe deserved peace." James's throat tightened. "I wouldn't have done that." "You don't know that," she whispered, "and neither did I." He went quiet. They both did. The silence between them wasn't hostile, it was tired. Victoria finally broke it. "Chloe's life is small, but it's good. She has structure, people who love her. I've worked every shift I could manage. I haven't dated, haven't traveled, haven't gambled with her safety once." "You gave up everything," James said quietly. She nodded, "because she was worth it. I want to help." She looked at him. "That's the easy part. Money, time, gifts. But what she needs, what I need to know, is that you'll show up when it's inconvenient, when it's not flattering, when she's sick, angry, heartbroken. That's what a parent is." James swallowed. "I want to be that." Victoria stared at him a long moment, then nodded. "One step at a time," she said. "Start by showing up. We'll go from there." The waitress brought the check, and James reached for it without a word. As they stood to leave, Victoria pulled something from her coat pocket. A photo, creased, faded, small. It was Chloe at age 3, wearing a glittered tutu and oversized sunglasses, holding up her favorite doll for the camera. "I was going to send this once," she said, handing it to him. "But I didn't." James took it carefully, holding it like something sacred. His voice caught. "She's beautiful." "She's everything," Victoria said, and with that, they stepped out into the cold evening. No promises, no declarations, but something had shifted again, subtle but undeniable. A line crossed, a truth shared. The first real terms of the heart spoken out loud. The photo shouldn't have existed, not from that angle, not from that distance. and certainly not with the kind of clarity that screamed zoom lens and professional equipment. But there it was, printed on glossy paper in the gossip column Victoria rarely paid attention to, usually wedged between celebrity sightings and speculations about tech billionaires' latest romances. Mystery girl calls CEO daddy at Burlington Gala. Who is she? Beneath the headline was the photo, Chloe, mid-step, hand outstretched. James's face was turned, caught in profile, looking not confused or distant, but moved. Human. Vulnerable. Victoria sat at her kitchen table, fingers curled around the ceramic mug she hadn't sipped in 10 minutes. Her phone buzzed with another message from Lana at work. A mix of concern and curiosity. You okay? It's all over social. I didn't know Chloe's dad was that guy. Victoria didn't respond. She couldn't. Not yet. Her heart was still thudding in that dull, spiraling way that always came right before something cracked open. Across the living room, Chloe was dressing her dolls for an imaginary birthday party. Cupcake wore a new dress Victoria had sewn out of a fabric scrap. Rosie had a teacup balanced on her head. I made place cards, Chloe announced. Bella gets the heart one because she's the nicest. Victoria tried to smile, but the muscles didn't quite work. She got up, walked to the window, and let the curtain fall back into place. She had this creeping, heavy sense that their quiet little world was now under watch. James read the same article in his penthouse office, the paper crumpled in his hand. Who leaked this? He asked, sharp and quiet. Marcus Hale, his assistant, didn't flinch. No idea. I'm tracing possible freelancers who registered press passes under aliases that night. My guess is someone got in through catering. He paused. It wasn't the hotel's team. That's been verified. James paced toward the window, jaw tight. She trusted me. She let me see her. Let me meet Chloe. And now this? Marcus hesitated, then said gently, You know this was bound to come out eventually. You're not just anyone. I wasn't trying to be someone that night, James muttered. That's the part no one seems to understand. He turned away from the skyline, his expression hardening. Keep this from spreading. No photos of Chloe. No doorstepping Victoria. I want this handled now. Marcus nodded, already moving toward the door. I'll speak to PR and legal. Damage control mode? James hesitated. No, not damage control. Just control. Marcus raised a brow. Understood. Victoria had barely made it past the employee entrance at the hotel before Carla intercepted her. The event coordinator's stilettos clicked against the tile like metronome taps of urgency. She wore a blazer too sharp for her gentle concern to feel entirely casual. We need to talk, Carla said, steering her toward an empty lounge. This isn't disciplinary, I promise, but James Burlington is connected to our biggest annual client, and when his name trends, people notice. Victoria folded her arms across her chest. So what does that mean? You want me to deny it? Carla softened. No. I want you to protect yourself, and your daughter, and this job, if you want it. Victoria leaned against the counter, breathing slow and steady. I didn't leak anything. I didn't ask for this. I believe you. Carla's voice lowered. But right now, your name is floating around a billionaire's story. That makes you a target. Maybe not a headline, but maybe tomorrow. Victoria didn't speak for a long moment. Then, if I disappear, will that be enough? Maybe for the press, Carla said. But I don't think it will be for him. Victoria swallowed hard. She knew Carla was right. James wouldn't walk away, and a part of her didn't want him to. But her first instinct always was Chloe. This wasn't just about romance or regret or even forgiveness. This was about safety, privacy, peace. That night, James called. His voice came through her cell line like thunder, muffled by distance. I'm so sorry. Victoria didn't say anything at first. She was lying in bed, lights off, listening to Chloe breathe through the baby monitor, even though she was too old for it now. But the sound still calmed her. I should have thought this through, James continued. I should have had protocols. I should have... Stop, she whispered. This wasn't your fault. You didn't bring a photographer. But you're not just a person, James. You're a name that lights up screens. A pause. Then, do you want me to back off? She closed her eyes. I want Chloe safe. I want her world untouched. And I want you to understand that I'll walk away again if I have to. Another silence. Then his voice, steady but aching. I don't want you to. I know, she whispered. She hung up before she could say anything else. And for the rest of the night, she stared at the ceiling, wondering how long you could hold on to something real before the world tried to tear it apart. Victoria hadn't walked this block in nearly 7 years. The cracked pavement of her childhood street in Astoria still held the same sun-faded chalk lines and crooked fences. The corner bodega still had the same flame-flickering neon sign and the smell of roasted coffee beans pouring out every morning. Time had passed, but the bones of the neighborhood had not changed. She crossed the street toward the stoop of the old building where she'd grown up. Third floor, left corner unit, once painted mint green, now a dull gray. Her mother's rosebush still clawed its way through the rusting fence out front. Untamed, stubborn. She stood there for a while, hands in the pockets of her coat, watching kids run by with backpacks too big for their shoulders. Their laughter echoed with the kind of freedom that only childhood can hold. Victoria used to think she'd raise Chloe here, in a place where people knew your name, where neighbors argued over parking but always brought soup when someone was sick. But she'd left when she got pregnant, afraid of judgment, of pity, of the weight of whispers. She had built a new life on the other side of the city. A safer one. A quieter one. But today, standing in the shadow of her past, she felt a tug of something deeper. She didn't want to go backward. But she didn't want to lose the roots of who she was either. She heard his voice before she saw him. "Is this where you grew up?" Victoria turned. James stood a few feet behind her, hands in his coat pockets. No driver, no entourage, just him. He looked out of place against the cracked curb and rusting gates, but his presence didn't feel wrong. Not this time. She raised an eyebrow. "Did you follow me?" "No," he said. "I asked Mrs. Ruiz. She didn't tell me much, just that you might come here when your mind was full." He shrugged. "So I came. I hoped you would." Victoria crossed her arms, half expecting irritation to rise, but it didn't. Not exactly. "I don't bring Chloe here, not because it's bad, it's just not her life." She paused. "But it used to be mine, before everything changed." James nodded. "You were just a girl back then. And you were a man who could vanish with the sunrise," she said, the edge in her voice soft but present. "I'm not proud of that." He stepped closer, cautiously. "I've been thinking a lot about what Chloe needs, and what you need, and what I can give that won't feel like an invasion." Victoria's eyes flicked to his. "Money isn't the answer." "I know, and neither is showing up only when you feel like it." "I do know." His voice lowered. "I've never done this before, Victoria. I've spent most of my life planning for things I could predict. Chloe, none of this was in my blueprint, but it matters more than anything I've built." She looked away, blinking hard. She deserves someone who's there even when it's hard, even when it's quiet. "I can do quiet," he said gently. "I want to be there for the messy, boring, ordinary things. I want to pick her up from school, sit through ballet recitals, carry her coat when she falls asleep in the car." The image made Victoria's throat tighten unexpectedly. "I'm not asking for a shortcut into your life," James continued. "I'm just asking to be part of it, the parts you'll let me in." Victoria was quiet for a long time. She watched a car roll by with music blaring from its cracked windows. A boy rode past on a scooter, balancing a pizza box on his handlebars. The world kept moving, and here they were, two people trying to rebuild something from the sharp edges of old choices. She turned to James. "I'm not promising anything yet. I'm not asking for promises. Just trust, one day at a time." She studied him, the man she had once known briefly, the man who now looked at her like he wanted to know everything he'd missed. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, just one word. But it was something. Not surrender, not certainty, just a beginning." As they walked slowly back side by side but not touching, Victoria felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not safety, not even peace, but possibility. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Chloe was unusually quiet. Victoria noticed it right away as they walked hand in hand toward the small neighborhood park on Saturday morning. Normally, Chloe's walk was a bounce, full of chatter about everything. What her doll cupcake wore to bed, how glitter sticks to pajamas, what color clouds might taste like. But today, her grip on Victoria's hand was looser, her eyes scanning the ground in a thoughtful hush. It wasn't until they sat on the bench by the sandbox that she finally spoke. "Is Mr. Bubblegum my daddy?" Victoria blinked. The question didn't come out with accusation or fear, just soft curiosity, genuine, patient, and impossible to avoid. She turned slowly. Why do you ask that, sweetheart? Chloe picked up a plastic shovel and stabbed it gently into the sand. Because you didn't say. And he looked at me funny, not mean. Just like he knew me already. Victoria's heart pulled tight in her chest. She took a slow breath, searching for the right words. Chloe, I want to always tell you the truth, okay? Even when it's hard. Her daughter nodded, still digging. Yes, Victoria said quietly. James is your daddy. He didn't know before, but now he does. Chloe didn't look surprised. She just nodded again. I thought so. Then, will he stay? Victoria swallowed. He's trying, but we're going slow so you don't get hurt, so no one does. Chloe considered that, then held up a tiny plastic teacup. He can come next time, if he brings cookies. Victoria laughed through the lump in her throat. I'll tell him. 2 hours later, James stood at the edge of the park, holding a bakery bag, and looking like a man trying not to seem completely out of place among toddler parents and stroller moms. Victoria waved him over, unsure if the tightness in her chest was anxiety or anticipation. He approached cautiously. Hi. Hi. Chloe ran up and peeked into the bag. Did you bring chocolate? James knelt. Triple chip. They're from the place down the block. The lady behind the counter said they were the best. Chloe took the bag and nodded solemnly. That was a good choice. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You bribing her already? He gave a half smile. I'm winning favor through sugar. Isn't that parenting 101? They sat on the bench while Chloe began passing cookies out to her dolls like a princess commanding her court. James watched her for a while, quiet, content just to observe. She's radiant, he said softly. Everything about her is so alive. Victoria nodded, unsure if she could trust her voice. I missed so much. The firsts, the routines, just knowing what makes her laugh. You still have time, Victoria said, surprising herself. But it has to be built. She doesn't need another adult making promises she didn't ask for. He nodded. Understood. Chloe came bounding over with a cookie broken in half. This piece is for you, she said, handing it to him. But you can't eat the sprinkle. Rosie said she needs it for her cake. James accepted it gravely. Tell Rosie I'll guard it with my life. Victoria watched them. A strange calm settled over her, a stillness that felt almost foreign, until her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. Nice to see you're not hiding anymore. How much is this story worth to you? She stiffened, screen tightening in her grip. James noticed. Everything okay? Victoria stood up quickly, forcing a smile. I think it's time to head back. He rose, watching her face carefully. Victoria? Not now, she said quietly, glancing toward Chloe, who was still happily feeding dolls their dessert. She didn't want him to see her panic, but it was pressure. The shadow of exposure. Their fragile peace had lasted 2 days. Later that night, after Chloe had fallen asleep clutching cupcake, Victoria stepped out onto the fire escape with her phone still clenched in her hand. She scrolled through the message again. A sick feeling turned over in her stomach. The media had found her once. And if they were sniffing again, it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Chloe. And there was nothing she wouldn't do to protect her daughter's world from being torn open. The cafe was quiet except for the low hum of early morning conversation and the soft clink of mugs on saucers. Rain tapped gently against the windows, blurring the world beyond into a smear of gray. Victoria sat in the back booth, arms folded tightly, the message still saved on her phone. She'd stared at it for an hour before texting James. We need to talk, privately, before this gets worse. He arrived within 15 minutes, his coat damp, jaw tight. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. What happened? She slid the phone across the table. He picked it up, read the message twice, and looked up sharply. His voice was low, controlled. Do you recognize the number? No, but it's local. Whoever it is, they know about Chloe. Or at least, they suspect enough to bait me with it. James's hand curled into a fist around the phone. This is blackmail. It's a warning, Victoria said. A reminder that I don't get to live quietly anymore. Not when I'm linked to you. His jaw flexed. I can bury this. I'll have my team trace the number, shut down any angle they try. I don't want you to handle it like a business deal, James. Her tone was firm. I need to know what we're doing, not just what you're fixing. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, let's talk like parents. Victoria's breath hitched. She hadn't expected him to say it that way. It disarmed her, cut through her defenses in a single sentence. She took a sip of her lukewarm tea. If this story breaks, Chloe's name could be dragged through the headlines. Speculation, paparazzi, people camped outside her school. That can't happen. She's 6. She still believes the moon watches over her when she sleeps. James's gaze dropped to the table. You're right. Victoria continued. So we have 2 options. I disappear again. Take her, vanish into someplace no one looks. Or we go public, James finished quietly, on our terms. She raised an eyebrow. Are you actually suggesting that? He exhaled slowly. I never wanted to live a public life, and I've spent years controlling my image. But Chloe isn't an image. She's real. She's mine. And if I have to protect her out loud, I will. Victoria stared at him. This isn't about just protecting her. This is about changing her life. James nodded. Then let me help shape it into something she can be proud of. She studied him, the sincerity in his voice, the quiet determination that wasn't about control, but about love. Love he hadn't yet said, but was starting to show. Going public means inviting every kind of attention, she said. Not just media, legal, corporate, your board, Chloe's classmates, our neighbors. I need to know you've thought about that. I've thought about nothing else since you texted me. His voice was hoarse, and I keep coming back to this. Whatever the cost, I don't want to be on the outside of her life anymore. Victoria didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window, watching a woman walk by under a polka dot umbrella. There's a condition, she said finally. Name it. You don't speak for us. Not in the press. Not in public. I do. Chloe's life has been shaped by my choices. I take responsibility for how her story begins. James nodded. Agreed. And if she ever says she doesn't want this, any of this, it stops. I mean it. Your legacy doesn't come before her privacy. I wouldn't let it, James said, his voice thick. Victoria looked down at the table and slowly uncurled her hand from her lap. Then we do this together, but quietly, carefully. James reached across the table, not for her hand, but just far enough that she could see he was steady. I'm with you, he said, whatever that means. That afternoon, he sent an encrypted email to his in-house legal team with strict instructions. No press releases, no leaks, no positioning Chloe as a story. If questions came, they would respond only with dignity and clarity. Mr. Burlington had recently learned of a personal family matter. He intended to respect the privacy of those involved. No further comment. He also installed new security protocols at Victoria's apartment, quietly, discreetly. No cameras, no headlines, just peace of mind. That night, Chloe fell asleep on Victoria's lap while watching a movie about a lost doll who found her way back home. Victoria brushed a hand over her daughter's curls, letting her heart settle. She picked up her phone and typed a single message to James. Thank you for listening, for letting me speak first. His reply came back almost instantly. Always. This isn't about controlling the story. It's about being part of it, if you'll let me. Victoria stared at the words for a long time, and somewhere deep inside, the first flicker of trust began to take root. Victoria didn't expect to find her own name in a headline, not at the coffee shop, not while waiting in line behind a teenager in headphones and a mother with twins. But there it was, on the digital screen, propped behind the barista. James Burlington's low-profile past, Who is Victoria Marlowe? A grainy, poorly lit photo of her, one she didn't even recognize, sat beside the caption. Below it, smaller headlines flashed. Single mother identified as Burlington Gala companion, mystery woman raising questions about Burlington heir. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. The world seemed to narrow. The sound of milk frothing, the clink of cups suddenly too loud. The barista called her name, but she couldn't move, not until her phone buzzed. It was a text from Carla. We need to talk. This is spreading faster than expected. You okay? She didn't respond. Not right away. Not until she stepped out onto the sidewalk and the cold hit her square in the chest. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't someone digging through James's past. It was hers they were unearthing now. Her job, her address, her daughter, her real life. Back at the apartment, Victoria locked the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing hard. Chloe was still at Mrs. Ruiz's, painting dollhouse furniture with glitter glue and singing a made-up lullaby about tea and tulips. Victoria opened her laptop. The article was already viral. Most of it was speculation, thin-sourced, slanted. It noted her work history in hotel housekeeping, her 6-year-old daughter, the gala moment with the child calling James Daddy. It painted her like a curiosity, a Cinderella without glass slippers. And James? He was referred to as reclusive but magnetic, a mogul caught in a human moment. She was the anecdote, the footnote, the afterthought. Her finger hovered over the power button. Then the buzzer rang. She nearly jumped. When she looked through the peephole, it wasn't a reporter. It was James, alone. She opened the door slowly, letting him in with a sigh. "You saw it?" she said. "I tried to stop it. My legal team issued takedown requests to 3 outlets already. This one slipped through." Victoria walked past him into the kitchen, speaking without turning. "They're calling me a housekeeper turned mystery mother, like I'm part of a scandal or a secret you were hiding." "You're not a secret," James said, following. "And you're not a scandal. They don't care." She turned to face him. "You don't get it. This isn't about you this time. I didn't ask to be anyone's headline." James stepped closer, measured but firm. "Then let me help control the narrative." "I don't want a narrative," she said, voice breaking. "I want Chloe's life to stay normal." James's expression softened. "I know, and I'm with you, but it's not going away, and we can either let them define the story, or we can choose how it's told." Victoria leaned back against the counter. "So what? A statement? A press conference?" "No, just a personal account, one story, yours, maybe an interview with someone we trust, someone who listens." She looked at him, searching for a sign of ego, of branding, of reputation management, but there was none. He wasn't trying to make himself look good. He was trying to give her a voice. "If we do this," she said, "then Chloe's name stays out of it. No photos, no interviews, not even initials." James nodded. "That's non-negotiable. I'll have legal draft it with every protection clause I can think of." She crossed her arms, staring out the window. "I'm not doing this to become anything more than what I already am." He stepped beside her, not touching, just standing near. "I wouldn't want you to be." Silence wrapped around them for a moment, then softer, more tentative. "I used to wonder what kind of woman you were," James said. "After that night, after I couldn't find you, I thought maybe it was a fluke, a dream." Victoria glanced at him, half a smile at her lips. "And now," he met her eyes, "now I know you're exactly what I never knew I needed, and it scares me to death." The air between them shifted, not charged, not dramatic, just honest. She looked down, then back up. "I need to pick up Chloe." James nodded. "Can I come?" A pause. Then she said without fanfare, "Yeah, I think that's okay." They stepped out into the wind together, side by side. No flashing bulbs, no reporters yet. Just 2 people trying to outrun a headline by writing their own beginning. Victoria hadn't seen Melanie Santos in almost 10 years. Not since their time at the community college where Victoria had studied early childhood education for a semester before reality forced her back into full-time work. Melanie had been bold even then, writing for the campus paper, working odd jobs to pay for her journalism degree, already dreaming of a byline at the New York Herald. So when Victoria saw her name on an email, private inquiry, her heart clenched. Melanie's message was short, respectful. "I know this is delicate. I'm not looking for a headline. I'm offering a voice. If you want to speak, I'll listen. No pressure, no assumptions, just the truth, if and when you're ready." Victoria read the message 3 times before closing her laptop and letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. There was power in choice. She hadn't had much of it lately. Now someone was offering her a way to be heard, not as a curiosity, not as a name trailing behind James Burlington's, but as herself. She met Melanie in a quiet corner of a midtown cafe the next day. No cameras, no notebooks, just 2 women with mugs of tea and a small space between them filled with history. Melanie smiled gently. "You look the same, just stronger." Victoria returned the smile, tired but real. "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm patching leaks in a boat that wasn't built for storms." "That's strength," Melanie said. "You're steering it." They sat for a moment in silence, the noise of the city muffled by rain against the windows. "I'm not here to dig," Melanie continued. "I'm not your PR. I don't work for a gossip site. If you want the world to know your side, why you stayed silent, why you protected your daughter, I'll tell it with care. And if you don't, I'll walk away." Victoria nodded. "I appreciate that." Melanie leaned in. They're going to write something, V, with or without you. The question is, do you want your daughter growing up reading a version of your life that's wrong? Victoria looked down at her tea, the steam curling between her hands. She thought of Chloe's tiny fingers on her dolls, her sleepy smile. The way she had asked, "Will he stay?" without knowing how much it echoed in Victoria's own heart. She wasn't trying to build a spotlight. She was building a shield, and sometimes shields needed words. That night, she sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, watching Chloe line up her dolls on the coffee table. "Do you think Cupcake wants a bedtime story tonight?" she asked. Victoria smiled. "I think she'd like one about a girl who learns to tell the truth, even when it's scary." Chloe blinked. "Like you?" Victoria nodded. "Just like me." 2 days later, a new article appeared on a quiet section of the New York Herald's website. No flashy headline, no paparazzi photos. In her own words, Victoria Marlowe on motherhood, privacy, and becoming visible on her own terms. The tone was measured, gentle, human. Victoria spoke of her childhood, her work, how she had raised her daughter with honesty and love and no expectation of help. She didn't name James directly. She didn't have to. She talked about protection, dignity, boundaries, and why it had taken her this long to let someone in. The last line read, "Some stories aren't secrets. They're simply sacred." James read the piece from his office, his hand resting on his phone long after he finished. He didn't call her. Not yet. Some moments weren't meant to be answered. They were meant to be honored. And this was hers. The lull between bedtime and sleep was sacred in their home. It was when stories were told in whispers and questions came in murmurs soft enough to slip beneath the door. Chloe lay curled against her pillows, one arm wrapped around Cupcake, the other stroking the hem of her blanket as if it held the answer to something she wasn't sure she could ask. Victoria sat beside her, legs folded under her, reading from The Little Garden Princess, Chloe's current favorite, but her voice faltered as she turned the last page and saw that Chloe wasn't drifting to sleep. She was wide awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, face serious in that way only children can be when they're asking about things adults fear. "Mommy?" "Yes, love?" Chloe turned her head slowly. "Why didn't I know I had a daddy before?" The air went still. Victoria set the book down and shifted closer, brushing her daughter's curls back with careful fingers. She had known this question would come, not if, just when. And now, in the dark, in the hush of a quiet bedroom, the moment had arrived. She took a breath. "Because I was waiting for the right time. I wasn't sure when that would be, but I promised myself I'd tell you when it mattered." Chloe blinked. "Does it matter now?" Victoria smiled, heart aching. "Yes, because now he knows about you too." "Did he forget me?" "No," Victoria said quickly. "He didn't know you existed. But now he does, and he wants to know you." Chloe frowned, thinking, "But if he wants to know me, why didn't he tuck me in tonight?" Victoria blinked, her voice catching. "Because we're still learning how to do this. All of us. But I think he'd like to. Someday soon." Chloe was quiet for a while. Then, "Can he read me a story too?" Victoria kissed her forehead. "I think he'd love that." 3 nights later, James came over after dinner. Victoria met him at the door, tension in her shoulders, but not in her voice. "She asked for you, to read to her." James swallowed. "Thank you." "Don't make it more than it is," she said. "She's curious. That's it." He nodded, stepping into the apartment. It smelled like jasmine tea and crayons and dryer sheets, lived in, real. Victoria walked him to Chloe's room and paused at the doorway. "She likes the garden book. Don't skip pages." "Wouldn't dream of it." When he stepped inside, Chloe was sitting up, her dolls arranged beside her in a neat little row. "Hi," she said, quiet but smiling. "Are you going to do the voices?" James blinked. "The voices?" Chloe nodded solemnly. "The prince sounds boring unless he talks like this." She affected a high-pitched squeak, then giggled. James chuckled. "I'll do my best." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, took the book, and began to read. His voice was steady at first, almost formal, but as Chloe leaned in, he softened, let the rhythm sway, added the silly voices she requested, even let Cupcake interrupt with a dramatic line or two. Victoria watched from the hallway, arms folded, heart full and uncertain all at once. This was what she hadn't let herself imagine, the sound of James's voice filling a room that had once only held her own. When the story ended, Chloe yawned and curled beneath her covers, eyes heavy. James set the book down and sat in silence for a moment, watching her drift. When he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "James?" He turned back. "Can I call you Daddy now?" His breath caught. Slowly, he walked back to her bedside, kneeling beside her. "You can call me whatever you want. I'll always answer." She nodded once, already halfway to sleep. "Okay. Good night, Daddy." James's throat tightened. "Good night, Chloe." He kissed her hair, carefully, gently, and stood. In the hallway, Victoria waited. James looked at her, eyes shining. "I'll never forget that," he said softly. Victoria gave a small nod. Neither will she. And for the first time, she believed it. Not because he said it, but because he showed her. Victoria stood at the sink, hands submerged in soapy water, staring out the window at nothing in particular. The apartment was quiet now. Chloe fast asleep, her dolls tucked in beside her like loyal companions, the kind of stillness that usually comforted her. But tonight it felt too still. Behind her, James leaned against the doorframe of the kitchen. He hadn't left yet after story time. Neither of them had spoken much since Chloe's question. "Can I call you Daddy now?" James hadn't stopped replaying those words, and Victoria hadn't stopped hearing them echo in her chest. She finally turned off the faucet and dried her hands. "Tea?" He nodded. "Please." She moved through the familiar motions. A tea bag. Hot water. Mugs too mismatched to be fancy, but always warm in the hands. She slid one across the counter to him, and he took it like it meant something. Maybe it did. "I didn't expect her to say it tonight," Victoria admitted. "I didn't expect her to mean it," James said, "but she did." Victoria looked at him carefully. "You handled it well." "I almost didn't," he said. "I wanted to cry. I haven't cried since I was 17. She smiled faintly. "Let me guess, boarding school, rugby accident." He smirked. "Close. My mother's funeral. I cried for 5 minutes. Then my father told me to fix my collar and stand up straight." Victoria's smile faded. "I'm sorry." James looked down at his tea. "It's fine. That's how he raised me. No space for softness. No space for anything like this." He gestured vaguely, toward the apartment, toward her, toward the memory of Chloe's voice calling him Daddy. "I don't know what I'm doing, Victoria. I'm terrified. Every time I look at her, I see everything I missed. And every time I look at you, I wonder if I'll ever be enough." Victoria leaned back against the counter, arms folded, unsure whether to speak. But she did. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "I've been carrying this alone for so long, I forgot what it feels like to lean." James met her gaze. "Then lean." She laughed softly, tired. "It's not that easy. I don't know how. I was 18 when I got pregnant, 19 when Chloe was born. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, slept 4 hours a night. I never had time to think about trusting someone." He stepped forward, slow but sure. "You don't have to trust all of me right now. Just the part of me that keeps showing up." That silenced her, because he had been showing up, not with money or promises, but with time, with patience, with bedtime stories and soft apologies and eyes that looked at Chloe like she was the center of the world. Victoria looked down. "I don't know how to let go." James's voice was quiet. "Then don't. Just let me hold one corner of what you carry. Just one. You can keep the rest." A long beat passed between them. Then slowly she nodded. "One corner," she said. He didn't move to touch her, didn't press, but he stayed, and when he finally left, hours later, she watched him from the window, not because she was afraid, but because, for the first time, she didn't want him to go. Later that night, Victoria sat on the couch, Chloe's blanket over her knees. She opened her phone and pulled up the article she'd written with Melanie. She read the last line again. "Some stories aren't secrets. They're simply sacred." And for the first time, she didn't feel like her story was just a burden to carry. It was something she could offer, one corner at a time. The Burlington boardroom on the 43rd floor was designed to intimidate. Polished oak, high ceilings, a wall of windows overlooking Manhattan like a silent reminder that everything down there, the people, the noise, the chaos, was beneath them. James had always hated it. He stood at the far end of the table, fingers braced on the edge, staring down at the printout that had been laid out for him. CEO's secret family? Woman and child allegedly connected to Burlington Air. The truth behind the gala moment. His father's voice cut through the heavy silence. "You need to get in front of this, immediately." James didn't look up. "We've already issued a statement." "Not the right one." Richard Burlington's voice was cold, precise. You said nothing of substance. The press reads silence as guilt. James straightened slowly. There's nothing to be guilty for. James. Richard's tone hardened. You've spent the last decade building this company's future. You've rebuilt our brand. We've acquired 3 markets under your name alone, and now you're letting this girl derail everything. She's not just a girl. James's voice was quiet but firm. She's my daughter. Richard's mouth tightened. And the woman? The housekeeper? Her name is Victoria, James said, and she raised Chloe with grace, strength, and more integrity than I've seen in half the men who sit at this table. Integrity doesn't write press releases, Richard snapped. Do you have any idea how many investors are calling me with questions? Then tell them I've got it handled. Handled? Richard scoffed. Your name is trending alongside gossip articles and parenting blogs. You've gone from CEO to tabloid father figure. James walked to the window, letting the cold light slice across his face. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. There was silence behind him, thick, disbelieving. Richard finally spoke. You've worked too hard to build this empire. You're not going to throw it away over a child born in obscurity. James turned, and something inside him snapped, not in anger but in clarity. I didn't build this empire just for stockholders. I built it so I could live on my terms, so I wouldn't have to be like you. Richard's expression hardened. Like me? Yes, the man who buried his grief in business, who taught his son to fear softness, who valued legacy more than love. James stepped forward now, quiet but unwavering. I'm not ashamed of Victoria, or Chloe. I'm proud, and if that makes people uncomfortable, so be it. Richard's eyes narrowed. And what happens when they come for her? For the child? The questions? The whispers? Are you going to watch the empire you built fracture because you wanted to play house? James didn't flinch. I'm going to protect them, even if it means rebuilding the empire from scratch. For a long moment, father and son stood across the table, mirror images of 2 legacies pulling in opposite directions. Finally, Richard said, You'll regret this. James held his gaze. No, I regret not finding her sooner. And with that, he turned and left the boardroom. Outside, the city buzzed beneath him, unaware, but James felt lighter than he had in years, not because he'd won a battle, but because for once, he hadn't surrendered who he was for who the world expected him to be. Victoria didn't hear James come up the stairs, only the quiet knock at the door, the kind that meant he wasn't sure if he was welcome. She opened it to find him there, holding nothing but a paper bag and looking like a man who'd just walked out of a war zone. She didn't ask what happened. Instead, she stepped aside and let him in. He moved quietly through the familiar hallway, pausing just long enough to scan the living room, the shelf with Chloe's books and dolls, the paper crown taped to the wall with glitter letters that read Queen Cupcake's Palace. He smiled faintly. She made me a crown last night. She makes one for everyone she likes, Victoria replied, closing the door behind her. James set the paper bag on the kitchen counter. Cinnamon rolls. From that place you mentioned once. The line was long. I waited anyway. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He turned to face her. His coat still clung to his shoulders, the chill of the world outside not yet shaken. I spoke to my father today, he said. Victoria leaned against the counter, arms folded. That sounds ominous. He told me I'd ruin everything by choosing this. You, Chloe. He said she was a child born in obscurity. Victoria's expression flickered, but her voice remained level. And what did you say? James looked at her, steady and unflinching. That I was proud of her. And of you. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but full. Victoria's arms slowly dropped to her sides. I keep waiting for the catch, she said, for the moment when this stops being real. James stepped forward. Then let me help you believe it's not going anywhere. She didn't answer with words, just let her eyes linger on his a moment longer than before. A little softer, a little less guarded, a little closer than they were. Later that evening, Chloe barreled into the living room with a construction paper wand in one hand and a tutu over her pajamas. Tonight we have a show, she announced, beaming, and you have to clap even if it's silly. James grinned, kneeling beside her. Will there be singing? Chloe nodded solemnly. And a magic trick. Cupcake disappears. But don't worry, she always comes back. Victoria sat on the couch, watching them. There was no fanfare, no cameras. Just one man holding a glittered wand with both hands, waiting for a 6-year-old to enchant a stuffed dog into invisibility. And there it was, the life Victoria had protected for so long. The quiet, messy, tender moments that weren't meant to be headlines. They were meant to be lived. When the show ended, Chloe crawled into Victoria's lap, her head heavy on her shoulder. James gathered up the glitter scraps and paper wands, placing them on the coffee table like they were made of glass. "She really is magic," he said softly. Victoria looked down at Chloe, her chest rising and falling in steady sleep. "She is." She looked back up at James. "You're not the same man I met that night." His brows rose slightly. "Better or worse?" "Still becoming," she said. "But I think you're closer than you've ever been." He sat beside her on the couch, not touching, not pushing, just near. And for the first time, Victoria leaned into him. Just slightly, but enough. Enough to know they were no longer strangers, circling each other across years of silence. They were closer than they were, and getting closer still. A letter arrived by courier, cream-colored envelope, embossed seal, no return address. Victoria opened it slowly, her thumb trembling against the thick parchment. She had known something was coming. A story as quiet and personal as hers couldn't stay protected forever, not when it involved a name like James Burlington. But still, she wasn't ready for the weight of what was inside. Notice of petition for paternal rights review filed on behalf of Richard A. Burlington. Her knees went weak. She sank into the kitchen chair, heart racing. It wasn't James, it was his father. James arrived within the hour. Victoria didn't text, didn't call. She simply sent a photo of the envelope. He showed up in a rush, jacket half-buttoned, expression drawn tight. He read the petition once, then twice, his jaw hardening with every line. "He went behind my back," James muttered, pacing the kitchen. "I told him we weren't pursuing anything formal. I told him we were keeping Chloe out of it." Victoria sat motionless, her hand pressed over her mouth. "This isn't just about you," she said finally, voice raw. "It's about her, and it's about me. Do you know what this means? It means your father is prepared to drag us into court." James turned, eyes blazing. "Over my dead body." But Victoria didn't flinch. "You don't control him, James. He's doing this to force a claim, to make her a Burlington, whether we want it or not." He knelt beside her, his voice softer. "I'll stop it. I'll file for injunction. My attorneys will bury him." "No," she said sharply. "That's exactly what he wants. A public fight. Something messy enough to make Chloe a weapon in your family's legacy game." James looked at her, eyes searching. "Then what do we do?" Victoria stood, arms wrapping around herself. "We step back. We think. I've lived my entire adult life in defense mode, James. I won't turn Chloe's world into a battlefield." He moved to her, gently taking her hand. "Let me protect you. You can't protect me from this. You're part of it." That stopped him. Cold. Victoria pulled her hand back, folding it across her chest. "You said you wanted to be in her life, to build this slowly, carefully. But you can't fix this with lawyers or money." He hesitated. "Then what do you want me to do?" "I want you to decide," she said. "Not just that you want to be a father, but what kind of man you want to be when someone tries to take her from me." James's eyes burned. "I would never." "I know," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "But if your name is tied to hers, if your legacy drags her into a courtroom, they won't care what you meant. They'll care who owns her." The word tasted bitter. James stepped back. His expression, usually so controlled, fractured into something raw. "I didn't want this," he said quietly. "I wanted to give her a future." "I am her future," Victoria snapped. "You don't get to rewrite that. Not now." Silence stretched between them, heavy with hurt and unspoken fear. Victoria's voice lowered. "You have to decide, James. Do you want her because she's yours or because she's herself? And do you want me because I'm here or because I've been holding everything you never had?" But she didn't say the last part, not out loud. That night, Victoria lay awake long after Chloe had fallen asleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city beyond their windows. She wanted to believe in James, in the man who had sat on the floor with a glitter wand and read bedtime stories without looking at his phone once. But hope was harder now, because hoping meant trusting him to fight the right battle. Not the one his father had started, but the one worth winning, the one that meant staying. James didn't speak when he stepped into the conference room. His legal team was already seated, 4 men and 2 women, suited and silent, folders neatly arranged, screens glowing. No one smiled when he entered. They'd seen the headlines. They'd read the petition. They expected a battle plan. He sat down, palms flat on the table. "Shred the draft," he said. The head counsel, a silver-haired partner named Graylin, raised a brow. "Excuse me?" "The parental rights paperwork, the paternity motion, the Burlington claim, all of it. Shred it. It's not going forward." Graylin leaned forward, hands steepled. "James, I need to advise you against that. If your father continues to escalate, a lack of formal recognition could—" I said no. His voice wasn't angry. It was steady, grounded. "I don't want my daughter's name tied to a family that sees her as a legal risk. I don't want her dragged through court filings like a piece of inheritance." Graylin opened his mouth to counter. James cut him off. "I'm not him," he said, "and I won't become him. End of discussion." Another pause. Then slowly, Graylin nodded. "Very well. Do you want to issue a public statement?" James thought for a moment. "Yes, but I'll write it myself." He showed up at Victoria's apartment that evening, holding a plain manila envelope. No bakery bag, no wine, no gifts, just words. Victoria opened the door cautiously. Her eyes were tired, her expression unreadable. He handed her the envelope. "What is it?" she asked. "My choice," he said. She hesitated before taking it, pulled the flap open, unfolded the single-page letter. It wasn't written on Burlington Global letterhead. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific. It was a public post, one he hadn't yet sent, one she now held first. "There's a difference between legacy and inheritance. One is what you build, the other is what you leave behind. I inherited a name, but I'm building a life. Victoria Marlowe is not a scandal. She is the mother of my daughter, the strongest person I've ever met. She taught me what love looks like when it's quiet and tireless and brave. Chloe is not a claim or a secret or a mistake. She is a gift, one I am honored to know. This will not be litigated. This will not be commodified. If you care about me, respect them. If you don't, stop pretending you ever did." Victoria lowered the paper slowly, her fingers trembling. She didn't look at him at first. Then she did. "She'll read this someday," she said quietly. "I hope she does," James replied. "I want her to know she was worth the fight." Victoria blinked hard. "So, this is you stepping back? This is me stepping in, without pushing," he said, "without trying to own something that was never mine to begin with." She stared at him. "And your father?" James shrugged. "He can take his legacy and polish it until it disappears." A pause, then softer. "I'm not building an empire anymore, Victoria. I'm building a home." She breathed out, the weight of everything finally beginning to lift. "I don't know what this means," she whispered. "Neither do I," he said. "But it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest." Chloe peeked around the corner, already clutching a new drawing, 3 stick figures standing beneath a pink sun, 2 tall, 1 small. Victoria watched as James knelt. Chloe leapt into his arms, and the world, so fragile, so hard-won, began to settle around them. A family, not by force, not by legacy, but by choice. Chloe had gone to sleep at Mrs. Ruiz's with a promise of popcorn and her favorite animated movie. It was only a few hours, just a little space to breathe, Mrs. Ruiz had said with a knowing smile. Victoria didn't quite know how to respond to. Now the apartment was quiet, no dolls on the floor, no lullaby humming from the other room, just the low tick of the kitchen clock and the soft clink of teacups being rinsed in the sink. James stood at the window, looking out over the city like he was seeing it for the first time without an agenda. "It's different here," he said. "The air's closer, like it doesn't try so hard." Victoria looked up from wiping the counter. "Not trying hard is kind of the motto in this place." He smiled gently and turned to face her. "No, it's honest here. That's what I meant." She set the towel down and leaned back, watching him. It was the first time they'd had hours without Chloe, without distraction, without either of them pretending they weren't afraid of what came next. "You were a stranger when you walked into my life," she said softly, "and then again when you walked back in." James nodded. "And now?" Victoria hesitated. "Now you're not a stranger, but I still don't know where this is going." He took a step toward her, slow and careful. "Would it scare you if I said I wanted to go somewhere?" "Yes," she said honestly. His expression didn't shift. He didn't try to change her mind. He just waited. So she added, "But it would scare me more to pretend I didn't want it too." A beat of silence passed between them, delicate and reverent. Then she said, quieter still, "Sit with me?" He followed her to the couch. They didn't touch at first, didn't rush. James sat at one end, legs stretched out. Victoria curled up at the other, blanket over her knees, the space between them full of quiet understanding. He spoke first. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me this isn't allowed, that I can't have this life because I never earned it." "You earned it when you didn't walk away," she said. "Not when you found us, when you stayed." They looked at each other then, really looked. There were no grand declarations, no perfectly timed kisses, just her hand reaching across the cushion, and his reaching back. Their fingers tangled in the middle, not clutching, not claiming, just touching. Enough to say, "I see you." Enough to mean, "I want this too." They sat like that until the city outside went quiet and their tea had long gone cold. And when Victoria leaned her head on James's shoulder, it wasn't dramatic. It was real, soft, earned, close enough to want, and finally close enough to begin. James lay back on the couch, one arm draped across the cushion, the other still loosely curled around Victoria's fingers. The lights were low, casting warm shadows across the room, and outside, the occasional honk or voice reminded them they were still in the middle of the city, even though it felt a world away. "Did you ever have this?" Victoria asked softly, not moving. He turned to her. "Have what?" "This. A place where it felt safe to be quiet." James was silent for a while, then he spoke. "No," he said, "not really. Our house was big, gated, overstaffed, but not warm. My mother had her own wing. My father traveled more than he stayed. Nannies rotated in and out like interns. I got used to silence, but it never felt like peace. It felt like absence." Victoria listened, heart slowing to match the rhythm of his voice. He continued, "Even now, my apartment's all glass and marble. It echoes when I walk. There's no laundry basket in the hall, no chipped mugs in the cabinet, nothing that says someone lives here who's loved." Victoria shifted slightly closer. "So why did you stay there?" "Because it was mine, and I didn't know I was allowed to want more." Her hand tightened around his. "You are." He looked at her then, really looked, and his voice dropped to something just above a whisper. "Are you?" Victoria blinked. "Am I what?" "Allowed to want more." The question wasn't about money or comfort. It was about freedom. Permission to hope for something outside of surviving, outside of schedules and scraped together routines. She took a breath, slow and uncertain. "I don't know how to want more," she said, "but I think I do." James reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Tell me." She hesitated. Then quietly, one word at a time, "I want Chloe to grow up knowing she can be soft and safe and strong all at once. I want to come home to someone who doesn't need me to be perfect, just honest. I want mornings that don't start with panic, nights that end with peace, and sometimes—" She trailed off, but James waited. "Sometimes," she said, "I want to be held." He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and she moved. Not because she was broken, not because she needed saving, but because she had finally said yes. The softest yes, the kind that builds a life. Saturday morning came in slow, golden waves. Chloe sat on the living room floor, humming to herself as she arranged her dolls into a semicircle around her latest masterpiece, a shoebox palace with glitter windows and a cotton ball moat. James sat cross-legged beside her, hair slightly mussed, a mug of coffee in one hand, and a pink tiara balanced on his head. He'd been dubbed Castle Guard of Snacks, a title he accepted with surprising dignity. Victoria stood in the kitchen, watching them with a towel slung over her shoulder and something unfamiliar pulsing beneath her ribs. Contentment. No waiting for the other shoe to drop. No flinching from what came next. Just this. The quiet rhythm of real life. Chloe said, adjusting one of her doll's dresses, "Rosie says your castle has a broken drawbridge." "Unacceptable," he said, in mock horror. "Can we file a repair request?" "I already sent it in," Chloe replied matter-of-factly. "Cupcakes in charge of castle maintenance." Victoria laughed softly, setting down a plate of cinnamon toast and walking over. "You two have a whole system, don't you?" Chloe looked up at her, eyes bright. "We're a team." She turned to James and blinked. "Are we a family now?" The question landed like a thread in the air, delicate, undeniable, and completely unforced. James froze. Not in fear, but in reverence. Like he was suddenly holding something fragile and precious. He looked to Victoria, unsure if he should answer, but she nodded ever so slightly, so he turned back to Chloe. "I think," he said gently, "we're becoming one." Chloe tilted her head. "So, not official yet?" "Not official," he agreed, "but we're getting close." She grinned. "Okay, just let me know when we're official. I need to update Rosie's records." James laughed, the sound warm and completely unguarded. Victoria sat beside them on the rug and reached for a doll of her own, a nurse in a purple dress who'd been left out of the royal rotation. "She's on castle guard duty today," she said. Chloe nodded. "Good, Rosie needs backup." James looked at Victoria, his smile shifting, softening, into something deeper. This was it. The shape of real wasn't sharp edges or declarations. It was shared morning light, toast crumbs on the carpet, a child asking if this feeling had a name. It didn't matter if the world had one. They did. And maybe that was enough. James stared at the architectural sketches on the dining table, fingers resting on the edge of the page like he was afraid of smudging the ink. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window as Victoria poured a second cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching him carefully. "Let me guess," she said. "You didn't sleep last night?" He didn't look up. "I've been working on this for weeks." Victoria moved closer, her gaze falling on the sketch. Neat, precise lines, balanced proportions, a brownstone. Nothing flashy, a stoop, a small garden, a second bedroom tucked behind the main. "This would be for us," he said, finally looking at her. "Not for show, not for the press, just something. Ours." Victoria exhaled slowly, scanning the plans. "It's beautiful." He searched her face. "But..." She didn't answer right away. She traced the pencil outline of the kitchen, a big one with counter space and breakfast stools. "I used to dream of a kitchen like this," she said softly. "When Chloe was a baby and I'd be eating toast over the sink while she cried in the next room, I thought, someday I'll have a kitchen where I can see her play while I cook." James stepped closer, his voice quiet. "Then let's make it real." She looked up at him. "James, a home isn't just something you build. It's something you grow into." His brow furrowed. "So this is too soon?" "No," she said gently. "It's not the house. It's the timing. You don't need to prove anything with walls or windows." He looked down at the sketches, his throat tight. "I don't know how else to show you that I'm in this." "You already are," she said, reaching for his hand. "You show up. You listen. You care. That means more than anything you could build." He nodded slowly, the lines in his shoulders easing. "And besides," she added, a teasing smile forming, "not this design doesn't have enough closet space. You've seen how many tiaras Chloe owns?" James barked a soft laugh. "I'll revise." "You can revise all you want," Victoria said, threading her fingers through his. "But just remember, we're already building something, right here, every day." He closed his eyes for a moment, letting that truth settle. He didn't need to buy her heart. He just needed to live in it. That night, after Chloe had gone to bed, James packed up the sketches. But he left one behind, folded neatly and slipped between the pages of Victoria's recipe book. On the bottom corner, in his handwriting, it read, "No matter where we end up, this is for us. Whenever you're ready." The cough came just after midnight. Sharp, sudden, wet. Victoria shot up in bed before she was even fully awake, heart hammering. In the next room, Chloe whimpered again. Another cough, followed by the thud of a small hand knocking over her water cup. James was already halfway to the door. By the time Victoria flipped on the lamp, Chloe was sitting upright in bed, flushed and sweaty, her breath coming in short, uneven huffs. "Mommy?" she whimpered. "My tummy hurts." Victoria dropped to her knees beside the bed, reaching for her forehead. It was burning. James hovered behind her, stunned and useless in a way he'd never felt before. "She's burning up," Victoria said, calm but clipped. "Grab the thermometer, top drawer in the bathroom, and a towel, wet, cool." He moved without a word, adrenaline surging through him like it used to during emergency business calls. But this wasn't about numbers or market damage. This was Chloe, and she was in pain. When he returned, Victoria had already helped her sit up. Chloe leaned against her shoulder, her breathing shallow and fast. James handed her the towel and crouched down, watching her hands work, watching the way she stayed steady even as fear flickered beneath her eyes. She was fine this afternoon, he murmured. She crashed fast, Victoria said. Kids do that. 1 minute they're running around, the next they're curled up like this. She took Chloe's temperature. When the reading beeped, her face paled. 102.7, she whispered. James froze. What do we do? Victoria looked at him, eyes clear now, even if her voice shook. We monitor. Meds, fluids, cool compress, and if it spikes to 104, we go straight to the ER. James nodded, but something cracked in his chest. He had held quarterly earnings reports in the middle of global crises. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals under pressure. But this was his daughter's small, shaking body pressed into the curve of Victoria's neck, and he couldn't do anything to fix it. I'll stay with her, Victoria said gently. Can you get the meds from the cabinet above the sink, the grape-flavored one? He moved numbly, hands shaking more than he cared to admit. The hours passed slowly. Chloe drifted in and out of sleep, her head on Victoria's lap. James sat across from them in the rocking chair, his elbows on his knees, watching them as if anchoring himself to the two people who suddenly meant more than anything he'd ever owned. At 3:12 a.m., Chloe stirred, her voice small. Daddy? James blinked. Yes, Bug? She reached for him blindly, her hand too warm. Stay close. He crossed the room in 2 steps and gently held her hand. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. Victoria met his eyes, and for the first time, she saw the man he'd been trying to become. Not powerful, not perfect. Just present. By morning, Chloe's fever had broken. She was still weak, curled into Victoria's side like a kitten, but the worst had passed. James stood by the window, watching the sunlight pour into the apartment like a promise. He turned to Victoria, voice hoarse. I was terrified. I know, she said softly. That's what being a parent is. You love them so much it breaks you when you can't fix it. He nodded slowly. But I didn't run. No, she agreed, her voice thick. You didn't. He crossed the room and brushed a damp curl off Chloe's forehead. I don't care how hard this gets, he whispered. I want all of it, even the fever nights. Especially the fever nights. Victoria reached for his hand, and in that quiet morning light, they knew. This wasn't a question anymore. It was who they were, what they were made of, together. The gates swung open with a soft hum, revealing the curved drive flanked by rose bushes in full bloom and a stone path that gleamed in the early afternoon light. Victoria gripped Chloe's hand a little tighter as they passed beneath the marble pillars. She'd seen the design sketches. She'd toured the grounds in boots when it was still raw concrete and scaffolding, but nothing compared to seeing it now. Finished. A dream she never dared say out loud, now standing 3 stories tall with sunlight resting on the second-floor balconies like a crown. Chloe gasped, wide-eyed. It has columns. James smiled from the driver's seat. She noticed the pillars first. Good taste. I saw the turret too, Chloe added. That's for my castle tower. Victoria glanced at him, eyes shining. Is that what it is? James gave her a quiet smile. It's whatever she needs it to be. Inside, the ceiling stretched high and arched, with soft gold lighting tucked into the architecture. The floors gleamed beneath their feet, warm-toned hardwood in the living areas, cool marble through the foyer and halls. A small staff of 4 stood respectfully near the main staircase. Housekeeper, chef, groundskeeper, and a part-time nanny James had insisted on, only if you approve her, he'd said. Victoria had met her 3 times before agreeing. The woman was gentle, discreet, and had somehow already learned how to fold Chloe's laundry the exact way Victoria liked. You did this, Victoria murmured as they stood in the foyer, and it's not too much. James turned to her. It's not about the money. It's about building something that feels safe for you, for her, for us. They toured the room slowly. Their rooms now. A chef's kitchen with window herb gardens and sunlight spilling across the breakfast nook, a formal dining room with space for extended family, future holidays, and noisy dinners. Chloe would someday roll her eyes at. A second-floor playroom already painted in soft pastels with built-in bookshelves, a reading loft, and more floor space than their entire old apartment. And then the 3rd floor. Victoria stopped at the doorway, her hand pressed to her chest. You didn't. I did, James said quietly. Her dream studio. A sunroom converted into a reading space and workspace, with room for floral design projects, crafts with Chloe, or just a place to breathe. And across the hall, James's home office. Dark wood, high windows, and a hidden door that opened into a private library nook, his one indulgence. Chloe ran in, barefoot on the rugs, her arms spread wide. "Can I slide down the banister?" "No," Victoria said automatically. "Yes, someday," James countered, lifting her into his arms, with a cushion at the bottom and a safety helmet. They all laughed, and for the first time, it sounded like a forever kind of sound. Later that evening, after dinner had been shared around the long kitchen table and Chloe had fallen asleep beneath a star-shaped mobile in her new room, Victoria stepped onto the back patio with James beside her. String lights glowed along the garden path. A soft breeze tugged at her dress. "It doesn't feel real," she whispered. James slipped his hand into hers. "It is, because you let it be." She turned to him. "I want more." His eyes warmed instantly. "More what?" She hesitated. Then, for once, she didn't hold back. "More mornings like this, more years, more children. I want a life that grows." He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing her skin. "Then marry me." Victoria froze, not because she was surprised, but because it sounded like a truth that had always been waiting. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't pull out a ring. He just looked at her like he already belonged to her and always had. She smiled through a soft breath. Yes, the softest word, the clearest answer. Yes, James. And with that, the next chapter of their lives truly began. Not in secret, not in silence, but in a home that could grow with them, a place for all of them, together. The dining table was littered with wedding brochures, fabric swatches, and a sketch pad where Chloe had drawn a very sparkly version of the big day. Everyone had wings in her picture. James wore a crown. Cupcake officiated. Victoria sipped her tea, watching her daughter with amusement and awe. "So I'm marrying a king now?" Chloe nodded firmly. "With a cape, but not a long one. Cupcake says no tripping hazards." James raised an eyebrow, peering at his cartoon crown. "Can I at least keep the office and not have to rule a kingdom?" Chloe paused, considering. "Okay, but you still have to dance." He sighed dramatically. "Fine, but only if there's cake first." Victoria laughed. It was a soft, easy moment, one of dozens they'd had in the new house. The kind of moment she hadn't let herself dream of for so long. A kitchen filled with family, not silence. A future filled with them. The doorbell rang. James stood to answer it while Chloe reenacted the bouquet toss with her dolls. Victoria barely noticed until he returned, with a single envelope in his hand. Her name was handwritten on the front. No return address. Victoria took it slowly, staring at the familiar penmanship. "What is it?" James asked gently. She sat down, the air around her suddenly tighter. "It's from my father." James went still. "Do you want me to leave?" She shook her head, eyes never leaving the envelope. "No, I want to open it." The letter inside was short, no apologies, no explanations. Just, "Victoria, I heard about the article, I saw your name. I know I don't deserve to write this, but I need you to know. If I could go back, I would do it differently. I should have been better, should have stayed. I hope you have love now. I hope she knows she's enough. I hope you know that you were too. Dad." Victoria read it twice, then folded it, then set it down carefully like it might break if she moved too fast. James said nothing. She sat in silence for a moment more before finally whispering, "He left when I was 13. Disappeared without a word. My mother tried to explain it like a storm, came in loud, left without cleaning up." James reached across the table and placed his hand gently over hers. "You don't have to carry it. I've been carrying it for so long I didn't even know it was there anymore." And now, she looked at him, her fiancé, the father of her child, the man who hadn't walked away even when things got hard, especially then. Now I know what it looks like when someone stays. She took a breath and then, finally, let it out. That night, she tucked the letter in the back of a drawer, not to hide it, not to forget, but because some things are meant to be part of your story, not the ending of it. Later, when Chloe had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Victoria curled up beside James on the couch. "We don't need a palace," she murmured. "I know," he said, "but I want to build one anyway, for her, for us." He kissed her forehead. "We already are." And for the first time, the past didn't feel like a weight. It felt like the thing she had finally walked through, so she could stand here. At the promise of us. The garden bloomed like it had been waiting for this day. Sunlight spilled between the ivy-covered archways, and golden blooms stretched toward the sky as if they, too, were bearing witness. A narrow stone path wound through trimmed hedges to the backyard terrace, where 20 chairs were arranged in 2 neat rows. Just family, just friends, just enough. Victoria stood upstairs in her bedroom, fingers smoothing the lace at her wrist, her reflection calm but radiant. Her hair was swept into a soft knot, curls framing her face. She wore no tiara, no veil, just a simple gown, fitted at the waist, flowing at the hem, elegant in a way that made her feel like herself, not someone else's idea of a bride. She turned as Chloe burst through the door in a flurry of ribbons and excitement. "I'm ready," Victoria smiled. "You look perfect, sweetheart." Chloe beamed. Her flower crown tilted slightly, and her pink sandals were already dusted with grass. "I practiced my walk 4 times, but I'm not sure about the part where you kiss. Can you skip that part?" Victoria laughed. "I'll see what I can do." Behind her, Mrs. Ruiz appeared in the doorway, tears already pooling. "It's going to be beautiful." Outside, James waited beneath a floral archway, a small boutonniere pinned to the lapel of a tailored navy suit. His tie was slightly crooked. Chloe had insisted on fixing it herself. The music began. Not a traditional march, but a soft piano melody Victoria had once played for Chloe on rainy afternoons. Chloe led the way down the aisle, scattering petals with intentional flair. She paused halfway, turned to the guests, and whispered loudly, "Okay, now it's the mommy part." Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. Then Victoria stepped out, and everything stopped. James didn't blink. She looked like everything he had never dared to hope for, real and walking toward him. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're more than I ever deserved." She whispered back, "You showed up. That's all I ever needed." The ceremony was short, personal. Vows spoken not for applause, but for meaning. James said, "I vow to be here when it's loud, and when it's quiet, when you need help, and when you don't ask. I vow to listen, and to stay." Victoria said, "I vow to believe in us, even on the days I'm afraid to hope, to let you carry some of what I held alone, and to build something real, not perfect, with you." Chloe stood between them, holding both their hands. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Chloe interrupted loudly, "Okay, but just one, not the movie kind." More laughter. They kissed, once, soft and smiling, and the backyard, in its quiet bloom, bore witness to the moment they became whole. Afterward, Chloe made a toast with sparkling apple juice and declared that being a family is way better than having extra dessert, which was, by her standards, the highest praise imaginable. They danced, slowly, together, under lights strung through the trees, no headlines, no noise, just love, rooted, gentle, real. It was early, sunlight just beginning to stretch through the high windows of the master suite. Victoria sat at the small table on the balcony, a robe wrapped around her shoulders, steam curling up from her tea. The morning was still and quiet in the way only their new home ever was, a hush that didn't feel empty, but peaceful. Behind her, the soundproof double doors remained closed. But she could sense James moving, probably in the adjacent office where he'd left the sliding panel cracked open the night before. Always up early, always reading emails before breakfast. Still CEO, still sharp, but different now, because when he was done, he'd come downstairs, not to a silent penthouse, but to a kitchen where Chloe would be waiting with a plastic tiara and a question about breakfast priorities. Victoria smiled at the thought. The mansion wasn't quiet because it was cold. It was quiet because it was full, and it was still early. Downstairs, the housekeeper padded through the kitchen, already preparing Chloe's preferred waffles. A gentle hum of classical music played through the whole house speakers at low volume. A toy tumbled inside the playroom, not the hallway, a doll slipping from the top of the reading loft. A soft thud followed by a sleepy giggle. Victoria didn't move. She knew James would be there in a moment, and he was. He stepped onto the balcony behind her, already dressed in a slate gray suit, but his eyes still warm from sleep. "She's awake," he said with a grin. "She asked me if Cupcake can come to our board meeting." Victoria laughed. "Well, she does have strong leadership potential." James leaned over and kissed her temple. "I don't want to leave today." "You'll be back," she murmured. His hand settled on her shoulder. "Always." Later that afternoon, Chloe raced through the garden path with 2 dolls under her arms and a clip-on cape streaming behind her. Victoria trailed behind, watching her daughter dart between hedges like a comet made of pink and laughter. "I'm making a surprise picnic!" Chloe shouted. "But it's a secret!" Victoria sat beneath the arbor, watching as her family moved like light through this house they had built together. She didn't need squeaky floorboards to remind her of life. She had this: a daughter in motion, a husband who showed up, a home that held all of them. That evening, they ate dinner in the kitchen, not the formal dining room, but at the long counter under warm lights. Chloe told a story about Cupcake saving the day at Royal School. James tried to keep a straight face while pretending to be scared of glitter. Victoria just watched, her hands resting on the curve of her mug, her ring catching the light. Not everything was perfect, but it was theirs, built not in marble or blueprints, but in late-night fevers, early morning tea, backyard vows, and the soft, steady work of staying. And then they began, not a new story, but a new chapter, of the only one that ever mattered, the one they wrote together.